The following is an emergency episode of Gamer Law, forced into being by recent events. Information in this video will be far more current than I'd like, largely focusing on games that happened this year. I fully understand if you want to skip this one, as we all know they stopped making good games like 10 years ago, easily.
Okay, this is not the alley that we were in previously, which means I want to look here.
Silent Hill, as a quick preview for when we get all the way down to S, is a series of, depending on who you ask, either 3 or 4 good survival horror video games from the distant past. Silent Hill 2's the big one, and if you know nothing else about the series at large, you probably know that's the one where the stinky man killed his wife. Thus is the legacy of Silent Hill, the series adopting the trajectory of the failing resort town it took for its setting. Development of the 4th game was an abject disaster, leaving the final product as, despite some good bones, an unfinished mess. Following that, Konami disbanded Team Silent entirely and outsourced the license to a sad rotation of American studios, each subtly more inept than the last.
Because there's a door. Okay, so the people who run this cemetery lock the front door with, like, the memorial medallion on the graves of 2 8-year-old kids. Look, I'm not criticizing. Like, they do things differently here in Shepherd's Glen.
That was in 2004, though. For the past 20 years, no notable entries have been made into the series. Just a lot of really shit ones, and some bad movies and comics, and an infamous pachinko machine. In the last 20 years, exactly 2 notable things have happened with the IP.
Out into the parking lot.
Number 1. In the middle of probably the saddest drought of horror games ever of all time, PT is released.
Walk a little bit closer. Hello? I can help you out. Whoa, okay!
Created from the unholy union of Hideo Kojima and Guillermo del Toro, PT was a staggeringly good playable teaser for an upcoming title that was to be known as Silent Hills. The trailer alone would basically shape horror games for years to come, and was well loved by critics and gamers alike. Konami immediately has a falling out with Kojima so brutal that not only is Silent Hills cancelled, not only was PT removed permanently from the PlayStation storefront, but the company essentially shut down its entire gaming wing just to spite Kojima.
Okay.
Konami would subsequently focus entirely on making pachinko machines. Number 2. Famous video game knife owner with a history of showing up in places where he really shouldn't be, one Mr. Pyramid Head, appears in multiplayer generator operation simulator Dead by Daylight.
Guys, today we're going to show you how to play Pyramid Head like a pro.
Fans immediately complain, not because Pyramid Head is kind of a guy James Sunderland, the stinky man's subconscious made up to punish him, and he really shouldn't be wandering around places where James isn't, but because Dead by Daylight Pyramid Head is unreasonably stacked. Man's ass goes for miles. How are you even supposed to work a generator in these conditions? It's distracting. Pyramid Head's ass is immediately nerfed into drab reasonability, thus prompting major fan backlash. You see, they hadn't really been complaining in the first place, they'd just been making the observation. Dead by Daylight's community is one of the gayest in all of video gamery, and the gays love to see some ass on a lad. The community gather in solidarity to save Pyramid Head's cakes and the dev's cave, restoring his ass to its former glory. That's 20 years of Silent Hill history. A game that didn't happen, and a game that's not in the series. Silent Hill is its own big weird event, and I don't really know the words to tell you how I feel about it. I'd consider myself a fan of the franchise, I suppose, but that fandom is strictly past tense and limited to the tiny sliver of series material that doesn't completely suck ass. I remember Silent Hill nostalgically, but I think the series ran its course and died out 20 years ago. That said, there's still that little tinge of dread whenever Konami say they're gonna do another one. Like, you know it's not gonna be good, we've come to terms with that. But Silent Hill titles do tend to be terrible in new and unique ways, further tarnishing a legacy that's been rendered basically invisible under so much existing tarnish.
Okay, 5 seconds, let's go. Nobody's getting a cameo. Oh my god, what is this clusterfuck? Run is what I voted for. Can I hide this? Hello?
Silent Hill Ascension premiered on Halloween this year, while I was in the wrong country and facing the other way. Silent Hill Ascension is also by far the worst product in the history of the franchise.
Oh, okay.
The controversy surrounding the game started long before there was actually a game to be controversial. Ascension was to be a mobile-only experience and boasted openly about its suite of predatory monetization options. Ascension was to be a game where the community influences decisions and where users could make their votes bigger by paying real money. Ascension would also be the only Silent Hill title with a season pass, despite the fact that that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a pre-show. I guess it fucked up.
The story of Silent Hill Ascension follows two groups of nerds on opposite ends of the planet, both of whom revolve around funny monster cults, and both of whom are populated entirely by people who think being in a funny monster cult is just a massive hassle. They talk about occult rituals in the same way you might talk about being mildly inconvenienced at the supermarket, and I'm pretty sure it's not meant to be funny. Both groups have had someone close to them die, but not someone they liked or cared about all that much. They can't show too much emotion, you know? Also, sometimes there's like monsters and stuff, I guess. That seems more like an afterthought. Incidentally, a lot of people seem to think the script may have been, at least in part, ghost-written by one ChatGPT. I can't tell you whether or not that's true, but if people think your script even could have been written by an AI, it's not a good sign. All of the characters are basically interchangeable, and most of the scenes are two identical bored weirdos talking about things neither they nor you care about for a while, before going their separate ways.
Toby.
There's good old relatable Toby.
Toby.
What do you want from me?
Are you kidding me? The bars are blocking the subtitles.
Justice.
You
Blood.
stupid
Tried that,
shitheads.
remember?
Can't do anything right. It gets worse
Look,
every
I'm
day.
sorry.
The single gameplay element, to use even that term perhaps a little generously, is voting on what might happen next. As previously mentioned, a particularly invested viewer prone to poor fiscal decision-making can easily overturn the outcome of the vote by throwing their entire wallet at their phone. Although most of the votes are really boring, and I really hope there aren't too many people spending money on this shit. The format of the votes is always the same. The path of salvation, the path of suffering, or the path of damnation. Essentially, good ending, bad ending, or bad ending. The obvious issue of votes for bad being split two ways apparently not occurring until a multi-day stretch of salvation winning every vote which occurred. At which point they might have just started fudging the numbers? Another thing worth mentioning is that nobody actually believes the results of any of these polls are the results of the polls, and the devs have thus far shown no reason for anyone to believe them trustworthy.
She puked up a Rachel. It's not, at this rate, it's not even going to need to be canceled to end early. It's just going to stop working. It's just going to straight up stop working at some point.
It's entirely possible that the choices are all predetermined, so less possible outcomes have to be voiced and animated. Though this does raise the further issue of, then why is the voice acting and animation so horrible? To which I do not have a satisfactory answer. Between votes, players are free to talk in chat, as long as by talk you mean post stickers, most of which are unlocked via the Season Pass, as use of actual words was banned immediately following the first stream. The line you'll hear is that too many people were talking about comb, which makes it sound way more fun than it actually was. I don't think during that first stream there was a single moment where there wasn't some weird little 4chan goblin just yelling a slur into the void. That was most of what was being said. What little moderation did exist was pretty much limited to a list of banned words, and mostly aimed to limit discourse surrounding the failure of Silent Hills and its eponymous auteur, a system which even still managed to fail when the community writ large thunderously declared, Hideo Kojima, come in my tummy. Following Following that stream, the chat is almost entirely a succession of people posting the one shady sticker over and over in unison, referring to the production at large rather than what's actually happening in the game. When combined, the box for voting and the box for chat take up about 60% of the screen real estate. The streams occur every day at a set time, and run somewhere between like 8 minutes and like 3 minutes, normally on the lower end, after which a gigantic QuickTime section plays, fully 5 minutes of QuickTime events that do not react to whether or not you bothered to do them. Scenes take place involving a random character going through a randomly stitched together series of rooms, all of which we were intimately familiar with after like the third day. At the end, the game tallies up all the people who won or lost the segment, at least in theory, and then makes a declaration.
Oh my god, it froze. Oh my god, is this it? Are we free? Look, look. People's names are still popping up and the thing's literally fucking frozen. Is it just me? Or is this everyone? Ash, yours froze too? You're frozen too, Bungalow? It's not just you. This is it. Are we free? Are we free now?
If the community predominantly lost, the punishment is that the character involved has their hope reduced, which according to the devs will factor into whether or not they die later in the story. If the community mostly won the event, the punishment is that they have to endure a second 5-minute long QuickTime event. I would advise anyone still watching this to refrain from actually pressing any of the buttons, as success is a far worse outcome than failure. But I personally don't think anyone at all is actually doing them, and the devs are just working the numbers again. Call me a conspiracist.
You're not getting past the first block. There are 3 blocks. And so that experience can go on for 15 whole minutes. 15 whole minutes. 15 whole minutes. If the community makes it. No.
The best moment in Silent Hill Ascension was Day 2's rather special 30-minute rant following the 7-minute stream, in which the actual CEO of the dev company lost his entire tiny mind yelling incoherently at the outraged fans. Your boy Jacob did not let the PR guy across from him say a single goddamn word.
Whether those branches were real last night or not.
This interview is longer than the episode. This is the real show.
Whose whole job it is to sort through the simulation, get the right recording.
The real show is going to be watching these devs melt down over the next 6 months.
Instead opting for a weird circular filibuster that kind of seemed at times like it might be looping. Like that level in Mario where you have to follow the right path or you end up back at the beginning. Man was so fucking mad. People were extremely justifiably calling him a scammer. If you watch any part of this entire shit show, make it this. Otherwise, there's a slow, boring Silent Hill themed Candy Crush minigame if that's more your speed. If I had to find one good thing about Ascension, that would be a difficult task. But I'd say the PR guys over there are actually doing a pretty good job. They're just kind of getting thrown out there to do hour-plus recaps on maybe 20 minutes of content a week, without any obvious plan of what they're supposed to talk about, and they're muddling through. When you're hooting and hollering about Ascension, leave this bunch out of it, okay? They're out here doing the dang job, they're getting that bag. They're honestly the only part of production that seems to be working correctly.
Oh no, we've managed to get into the woods again. What are the chances of that happening? Weather seems fine though, it's a bit foggy. Other than that. I mean, I guess it's not even the lake, it's the magic of the lake. I mean, I know it's not a lake, it's an ocean, but you know what I mean. You okay? Hello, Fruity Spruce. I'm afraid I've not seen Flushed Away. I'm deeply sorry.
Of crucial importance, the first and most important thing to know about Alan Wake is that he smells of either Old Spice or Axe body spray, with just a hint of unwashed ass.
Visual, visual style of Aardman without actually putting in the effort, which is sort of a weird choice. Because was it the chicken one? Not Chicken Little. The one where the chickens try to escape. Oh, I'll ask my phone. What is the animated film about chickens? Oh, Chicken Run, yes.
Excuse me, miss, can I ask you a couple of questions about the 2000 stop-motion animated film Chicken Run?
But I believe that is also done in an Aardman style.
The second thing to know is that Alan Wake is a 2010 action horror title, largely revolving around the simple loop of wandering in a forest looking for thermos flasks hiding in the tree branches, being ambushed by shadow men, and shooting those shadow men in the face. Apparently, Alan Wake was initially meant to be an open-world survival game, but that was scaled back into a linear, level-based shooter. It's a Remedy game though, so, you know, it's kinda good. Just a little. The people over at Remedy like to call the game a psychological thriller as opposed to a survival horror title. I would argue it's neither, and instead a silly shooter game with a weird nonsense plot. You play as the titular Alan, a famous writer of terrible novels, and one of few people to have written more books than he's read. He's having a quiet little trip with his long-suffering wife, visiting a quaint lakeside town to try and recover from writer's block, where he, it gets a little bit weird from there. There's like a witch, and a magic lake, and a magic manuscript, and in short order you're playing out the text of a bad horror novel you wrote while hypnotized by ghosts. I've listened to Sam Lake, head Remedy lad, Max Payne's literal head, and writer on this project, talk really enthusiastically about the script of Alan Wake. He seems genuinely passionate and really lovely, and I definitely wouldn't have the heart to tell him in person that it's dog shit. The game escalates fairly effectively in terms of bombastic set pieces, but also in terms of making less and less sense as the story goes on. Eventually you manage to blast all the shadow men out of the way, return to your magic typewriter, and write the final line. It's not a lake, it's an ocean. A line which doesn't make sense and is very funny.
I think what makes Aardman unique is everyone else I've ever seen do stop motion.
They put a post office on top of them. Didn't see those, I just heard the music sting. Now I did say Alan Wake isn't a bad game, and I do stand by that. Its main strengths coming from the environmental design and the gameplay. Provided you like looking at forests at night, I do by the way, Alan Wake offers a beautiful variety to choose from, and has cool, weird darkness effects that were amazing at the time and still look cool as heck today. Styles forever, you know? It doesn't get outdated. Fighting your garden variety Shadow Man is a two-stage process. First, obviously, you gotta burn off the darkness that armors them with your torch. Then you have to shoot them with bullets. The net result is an empirically pleasing array of lights and sounds with slow-motion dodges and big impactful special weapons for flavour. Alan Wake does lack a lot of the charm of Remedy's earlier Max Payne's, being a realistically unlikable man in a reality-adjacent world of haunted lakes. Sorry, haunted oceans. As opposed to a po-faced, camera-mugging cynic in a city of cartoon gangsters. And if I had to pick one to play, it'd be a Max Payne every time. But we live in a world where there are lots of different video games, and we might have already played Max Payne. The thing I love about Alan Wake that isn't common, and the thing that I think Remedy would take away from this title as their biggest triumph, is the attention paid to the setting through the environment. There's a whole silly TV show you can find across a few locations, a Twilight Zone knockoff canonically part written by Alan himself, and an old man hosting a local radio talk show comes up a few times. There's few enough people in town that he probably knows every one of them, and the show's just his friends calling in to chat with him about the nuances of such philosophical concepts as true love late into the night. This stuff, combined with the lovely views and scenic walks that I'd love to personally experience, genuinely, if not perhaps during the day and without fear of possessed barrels being launched forcefully at my head, means that the game manages a strange immersive quality despite the unlikable protagonist and his nonsense journey. Remedy have always practiced this uniquely intricate brand of environmental storytelling, and I'd go even harder into it with their next title, Control, which fucking slaps, by the way. You should check that one out. The other thing we need to quickly touch on is, while Alan himself is a really boring and horrible character, well, firstly, that's not the VA's fault. Matthew Peretta would go on to be Dr. Darling in Control and reprise his role as Alan in the sequel, where he has a lot more weird shit to do, thusly proving himself to be extremely charming and likeable as an actor and as a voice. And secondly, that while Alan sucks, the rest of the cast are kind of fire. The obvious standouts being the Andersons, the old gods of Asgard. I'm not lifting the good gun on you.
I'd known the brothers used to be some kind of rock stars, but it hadn't really sunk in until I saw the stage.
Ow! Run! Incoming! There's too many of them! God damn.
Okay, so the lake is like a magic lake that can make fiction affect reality, right? It's also an ocean sometimes, I guess. And the witch is trying to kidnap really creative people to make them write a story where she turns into like the ultimate Mary Sue and could just kind of do whatever. Well, Alan's not the first one who got, you see. Before him, there was Tom Zane, a widely well-regarded poet who, in an effort to not get owned by the witch, tragically wrote himself out of existence, save for the little fragments of him that still linger to help Alan on his journey. Before Tom were the Andersons. Tor and Odin Anderson are a two-man rock and roll duo who lived on a nearby farm where they brewed moonshine watered down with haunted lake juice and drank until they saw ghosts. Tor and Odin Anderson did a lot of drugs in the 80s, and they're not all the way together when you meet them in the retreat for troubled artists. They too were victims of the ghost, however. They're just ones who've partied so hard in the past that their brains are now the wrong shape for witch possession or something. If you could meet them sober and lucid, these two rock and roll granddads could absolutely just tell you exactly what's going on and save you a whole lot of trouble. I suppose windows for that would be few and far between, however. You do get to visit their farm at least and perform probably the best set piece in the game at the rock show, after breaking up in their band with a spare Viking longboat you find just lying around. Remedy have always worked closely with Finnish rock group Poets of the Fall, and whenever you hear the Old Gods playing throughout the Allens and Control, that's who you're really hearing. The website for Poets of the Fall calls the Old Gods of Asgard their alter ego band, though both bands do exist separately within the interconnected universe of Remedy's games. Third and fourth members of the band were revealed to exist during the events of Alan Wake 2. One Fat Bob Balder, a hippie-type guitarist who served as a calming influence on the true drug-addled and plainly unhinged brothers, and one Loki Darkens, a very silly name that just screams Enemy, Darkness, Dementia, Ravenwade to me. But Remedy stuff just be like that sometimes. Regardless, the band is inextricably linked with Remedy's multiple franchises, often singing about the stuff you as a player are doing in tense moments. And even the name and theming of the band are a reference to the use of Norse mythology in the earlier Max Paynes.
Okay, so we can go up there. Let's follow the footprints for now, though. I just want to check out the store. Now that we're done with that. Cauldron Lake, campground.
Before we get into this, fair warning. Me and Keish are getting on with Alan Wake 2, and we're like 20 hours in already. But we haven't finished all the way yet. There's a lot of game in this game, and it's been a blast so far, but if the ending's like so bad that it colours the whole thing, well, we wouldn't know about that yet. Anyway, Alan Wake 2 is fucking weird. Remedy's various franchises were always interlinked in subtly referential ways. The Bureau of Control has been looking into Alan Wake ever since his disappearance, and Max Payne was in fact a fictional character in stories written by Alan, although they had to change the name as they'd already sold him off to Rockstar, a move that'd go down like Baghdad with G-strings.
This place was like Baghdad with G-strings.
Not until Alan Wake 2 did Remedy decide to fully commit to slamming all of their various franchises together. Alan Wake 2 is as much a sequel to Control as it is the first one, although enough is explained on site that you could play it without having been through either. To those who've played the earlier titles, though, it also serves as a retrospective on what has been, which could have been insufferably smug, but manages to come across earnest and vulnerable instead. The game opens with... Well, okay, the game opens with you playing a big blue naked guy with his butt glowing in the moonlight. Lots of ass in this episode, huh? But a little bit after that, you find yourself sitting in a car with Max Payne, voiced by James McCaffrey, who'd slid back into the role so naturally you wouldn't know he'd ever been gone. If anything, he's going harder than usual in this one. And faced by Sam Lake, just so there's absolutely no ambiguity around who he is, even though everyone keeps calling him Alex for some reason.
Okay.
You, our new character, Saga Anderson. Weird name, wonder if it's in reference to anything, huh? FBI agent and practicing wizard, whose gameplay mostly revolves around wandering about the various small towns and forests around Cauldron Ocean, looking for clues. Initially about a series of ritual murders, and eventually onto the broader topic of what the fuck is even going on with Alan Wake? Alan himself is still about, though, and his half of the game, by contrast, has him wandering through a series of bizarre levels, split up by unhinged live-action cutscenes in a nightmare version of New York, where everything's made up and the doors don't quite behave how you might expect. I think the rooms might actually connect where it says they do on the map. I might just be bad at reading math. The game in general commits hard to being as weird as possible, and I think that works surprisingly well with the tone it's going for, which is much more heavily horror than the previous title.
Word of lamp. Word of lamp.
How many words do you know for lamp, Ish?
At least 2.
You fire away.
Lamp?
That's 1.
Light?
That can be.
Technically?
It's a broader concept, but you can refer to a lamp as a light.
I can tell you to turn on the light, and
I can't. There's no light.
Well, there's not
There's
in
no light
here.
in this part of the room.
But if we had a lamp, and I said, "Hey, turn on the light," you...
I think in general horror games have struggled with the fact that while games are a perfectly suitable vessel for horror, fear is not a suitable emotion for a long play session. Alien Isolation is not on this list, but is a great example of a game that manages to be absolutely terrifying for maybe 4 hours, and then extremely annoying for another maybe 16. Alan Wake 2 rations out the fear by dedicating the rest of the time to invoking an atmosphere where you have absolutely no idea what might happen next, and nothing is off the table. One of the levels in this game is a musical. It's not scary, it's in fact very funny and kinda rad, but you did not see it coming, and you do not know what might happen afterwards. Alan Wake 2 commits just as hard as any of Remedy's previous games on the world-building front, if not even harder. There's as much loose, readable paper scattered around as there is in the entirety of The Oldest House, not to mention a reprisal of Pat's radio show, though it's taken on a tragically sad turn this time, and a series of collectible television advertisements that go pretty hard, not to mention the wildly cheesy Alex Casey monologues scattered throughout the void. There are a tremendous amount of collectibles in this one, come to think of it, and each one has at least an attempt at lore tied to it. I know this stuff doesn't do much for a lot of people, but I've already told you I'd play a game where you just walk around in the woods, man. I love this shit.
Well, let's do it then. Hero.
Now, if you're sitting there saying, yeah, that all sounds lovely, but how does it play? I might have bad news for you. Remedy games have traditionally been built around a good, sturdy skeleton of fun but arcadey bones. Games that aren't afraid to be a little gamier than other AAA releases, because why are we here if not to play a fucking game? Control is, to me, one of the more recent examples of a big release game that doesn't suck ass. And that's because while every other dev company in town were focusing on making everything as realistic as possible with seamless animation transitions and procedurally shriveling horse testicles, Remedy were happy to make a game where you were just fast as fuck, wielded a magic gun, and could kind of fly. I know this is probably an unpopular take, but I had more fun just explosion dashing through office furniture in Control than I did in all of Red Dead 2. Alan Wake 2 has made the extremely disappointing move of, rather than stick with their fast-paced and fun roots, kinda just copying the gameplay from the RE4 remake, and kinda doing everything just a little bit clunkier and worse. RE4 Remake is a good game that I personally think relegates itself to being solidly worse than the original classic, based largely on everything being over-animated to the point of Leon sometimes just not doing the thing you're telling him to do. Alan Wake 2 is also a good game, but it's even worse with it. I don't know why we, as a society, decided this is what we wanted out of games, man. Has anyone ever said the sentence, "Ugh, this game sucks, it's too easy to cancel out of a reload, and I don't get stuck on every weird little object in the world"? Before right now, I mean. Alan Wake 2's gameplay is meant to be a little wibbly-wobbly. You're meant to feel underpowered and overwhelmed while shadow people dash in at you from every angle, but issues with the controls and long, uninterruptible animations can lead to tense encounters feeling frustrating, especially in some of Alan's sections, which take place in corridors that are too narrow, with enemies that should either be able to teleport at will or grab you, and not both. In general, the enemies are kind of mid, not particularly interesting, and there's a host of other niggling little UI problems too that you'll be constantly working against as you play. The flashlight doesn't quite aim straight at most ranges, anything in your bag that isn't hotkeyed is basically off limits in a fight. If you use one of the little bitty healing items, your guy just throws the rest of them back in their satchel without asking.
We get her? Oh my lord, dude, she's terrifying.
We fell through the floor semi-regularly too, but we were playing pretty close to release. On the whole, I'm a little disappointed with the overall gameplay. I was kind of expecting something weirder and better from Remedy. The game overall, though, is a little special. If I had to give a score, I'd probably give it a just slightly worse than Control out of 10. Play it if you really like Remedy's older stuff, or just weird garbage in general, and you've already done the Resident Evil 4 remake.
Okay, somebody is trying to attack me. Deal.